Hi everyone, welcome to Cover Crops for the Fall. My name is Holly Jones and I'm the Helping Hands Garden Manager for UT Gardens in Knoxville. And we're going to talk about some fall cover crops today. So I want to get started by just looking a little bit in general about cover crops. So these are plants that we grow not for harvesting for ourselves, but they are grown to enhance the ecosystem of our garden. And they're commonly used by large-scale farmers, but they're perfectly applicable to small gardens as well. So a few of the things that these multifunction plants do, they improve soil health, and they do this in a myriad of ways, and we'll talk about some of those. They increase and retain nutrients. So one way that nutrients are increased is through the action of symbiotic relationship between bacteria and some legumes. These members of the legume family can actually convert ambient nitrogen that is in a form that's not usable by plants into a form that is usable by plants. So it's a way of like creating nitrogen fertilizer in your soil. These cover crops can also retain nutrients, and so this is done through what's called like scavenging. And basically the cover crops will use up and hold nutrients in the soil. And then when you cut down or kill those cover crops, they release those nutrients, and then the nutrients are there located in the soil at the place where you need them, which is right next to the roots of the crop that you're planning to grow. So it's a way of holding nutrients that might otherwise leach away. These plants can protect soil from erosion and compaction. So just the sheer fact that you have a plant growing in the soil is going to hold the soil in place. So when you have rain rain events that might cause erosion or pull the soil away, make it flow away, the roots can actually hold it in place. And then the same with wind. We can lose organic matter and soil off the top just through wind blowing it away. But so having the plants there and the roots holding the soil in place, that really slows down erosion. They also help protect against compaction. And so we want to have soil that's really loose, and it has channels for water to flow through. You want to have soil that the roots can grow through easily, and you want to have soil that actually has places for oxygen to be. So it needs to be sort of light and fluffy. And when soil gets compacted, all those channels for air and water and roots get smushed down and they disappear. And so then the soil is not as good. So the way that these cover crops can protect against compaction is, one, the roots actually help break up the soil and create channels. And another way that they work is by dispersing raindrops. So rain comes down, and it can be like a large drop of rain. You have like a whole lot of rain coming down in large drops that can beat down your soil and actually compact it. And so the leaves on weeds sometimes and cover crops actually disperse or break up those little drops of water into smaller drops of water. And those smaller drops of water have less of an impact on the soil, so they create less compaction. Also, cover crops can help control pests and diseases, and this could be through plant exudates or oils or chemicals that the plant actually secretes, or it could be through just by attracting beneficial insects like predatory insects to the garden, providing feed, providing pollen and nectar for pollinators as well. So they can really help to support the different organisms within the ecosystem of your garden. Also, cover crops are used to prevent weeds, to help cover the soil so that there's not a spot for weeds to grow. And so anywhere that you've got a desirable plant growing, that's a place where a weed is not going to be able to get in and become established. So they work well to help manage weed problems. And then also they are valuable for their aesthetic value. So I would much rather look out in the wintertime and see a nice green cover over my garden than just a plain brown color. And then also many of them bloom in the springtime, and they can be really pretty and add some nice color and flowers to your landscape as well. So when we're looking at how to choose the best cover crop, because there are lots of different species out there, lots of different plants that are used as cover crops, you want to think about what your goals are. And so some things that you might be trying to do, you might be trying to increase your organic matter. In this case, you would want to look for a cover crop that is going to provide a lot of bulk, and it's going to have a high organic matter input. You might be really needing to increase nitrogen. This could be, if you're planning to grow a crop that is a high nitrogen feeder, something like a leafy green crop, or like corn, for example, really likes a lot of nitrogen. That will help inform you of which cover crop to choose, based on what it is that you're trying to grow. Are you trying to reduce erosion? So maybe you need like a really fast growing cover crop. Are you trying to manage weeds? Again, fast growing cover crop to help you manage those weeds. Are you looking to improve drainage? So we'll look at tillage radishes, and these are really good for breaking up compacted soil and improving drainage. And then thinking about how are you going to terminate your cover crop, or how are you going to kill it? What tools do you have? What's your strategy going to be? And that will help you choose, help you determine which cover crop you want to use. For example, this one here to the right that we see is buckwheat, and this is one that I grow a lot in the kitchen garden, and it is really lightweight, so it's a good one for just managing with hand tools because it cuts down really easily and you don't have to kill yourself trying to deal with it. So if you're just using hand tools, you really want to find a plant that's going to be easy for you to cut down. So a little bit more about termination or killing the plants. When are you going to do that? It's really going to depend on the plant and when you planted it and what the season was like. But in general, you want to avoid letting those plants set seed. So 2 reasons for that. 1, you don't want to create a weed problem in your garden. And 2, if you allow your cover crop to create its own seeds and you were hoping to get some nutrients from that cover crop to be released into the soil for your desired crop, if you let the cover crop produce its seeds and go through that whole process, then it's going to actually utilize a lot of the nutrients for its own purposes to produce those seeds. And so you might miss the opportunity to be getting some of those, fertility characteristics out of the plant. So you do want to cut them down before they're allowed to produce viable seed. For many of these cover crops, you can apply the general rule of killing them when you see the entire population. You're looking at the entire population and you see that about 30% of the population is flowering. That can be a good general rule about when it's time to start thinking about cutting down the cover crop. And if you don't let them flower and you try to kill them before they've flowered at all, you may run into an issue where the plant doesn't die. So even if it's an annual, it may try to re-sprout. So you do want to let it start to flower so it can start going through that life cycle, and they'll usually be, they will, die more easily in that case. So how are we going to do it? like I said, you can use hand loppers. This picture right here, this is at UT Gardens. We got a couple of volunteers. They were chatting away and cutting down our crimson clover using hand tools. And you just go right to the base of the plant and cut as close to the ground level as you possibly can. And that can be a really effective method. You can also use a weed eater, and I often do that. It's a little messier, a little, less control, but it's nice and fast. Depending on the way your bed's laid out, you might be able to use a mower, and I would just set it on the lowest possible setting, so you're cutting the plant really, really, really low to the ground so it doesn't try to grow back again. And then another option may be, depending on which variety you choose, you may actually get to benefit from a winter kill. And so that would be where you would plant something about now, and it would not be a winter hardy species. So it would grow up, and you'd get some bulk out of it, some organic matter over the course of a few months of the fall. And then once the temperatures got really cold, the winter time may just kill your crop for you, and then you just let that residue lay on top of the soil and sort of break down over the course of the winter, and you're ready to plant in the spring. So that does work for some crops that are more cold sensitive. So these cool season varieties that we are going to look at, they are going to be seeded in late summer for the most part to early fall, and then they're going to be terminated the following spring and / early summer. And one thing to think about is that you want to seed them in time for the plant to get somewhat established before winter sets in. So you want to think about them surviving over the winter. They need to be, a nice sized plant to actually be able to survive over the winter. So you want to get them going pretty soon. Like we are in the window right now for most of these crops to go ahead and get them started. Really the window opened in sort of mid-August, and it will go through early October. So right now is like a great time to start cool season cover crop varieties. So we're going to look today at mustard, hairy vetch, crimson clover, winter wheat, tillage radish, and phacelia. And these are just some of the many cool season crops that you can choose from. So hairy vetch, this one is really nice because it does have lightweight stems, so it's pretty easy to deal with. It's great because it does fix that ambient nitrogen. It is a legume, and it's wonderful for attracting beneficial insects. Ladybugs love it, honeybees, wild bees. It is fast growing, so it does work well to suppress those weeds. You do not want to allow this one to set seed because it can become a weed problem if you let it. So you do want to have a good plan and make sure that you take care of it before it's allowed to make seed. This one is not recommended if you have root knot nematodes. So this is something I learned because I do have these pests in my garden. And members of the legume family can be a host for root knot nematodes. So if you already have an infestation of root knot nematodes and you know that you do, then you may want to avoid the legumes. But if you don't have the root knot nematodes, legumes are awesome because they will add nitrogen to your soil. So this is an example of the hairy vetch, how we were taking it down in the springtime. So this one is popular for tomato growers, and this is how I learned this method by looking at some large-scale tomato farmers. And what you do is you grow the hairy vetch in the fall. It overwinters, covering the soil. And then in the springtime, you leave the roots in the ground and you just cut the hairy vetch down. And because of the nature of its growth, it's sort of this viney, matted plant. You can actually just roll it up like a carpet. And so you just start at one end and you start rolling it up and you cut all along the base. So you cut those stems right at the ground level, and you roll it, and then you cut it again, roll it, cut it again, roll it, until you get to the end of the bed. And then you have this nice hairy vetch carpet that you've disconnected from the roots. You leave the soil undisturbed, let the roots break down in the soil and release that nitrogen, and then you just unroll your carpet of vetch, and within about a week you'll have a nice dried straw-like cover on top of your soil, so it creates a mulch. So you get the nitrogen released in the soil, you get the nice mulch cover on top. It's really lightweight, and when you're ready to plant, you just clear a little spot in your cover and plant your plants right there. And it's really really easy to do and quite effective. The next one is crimson clover. This is probably one of the most popular cool season cover crops, and you'll see it a lot of times grown in big fields around in Tennessee and Middle Tennessee and in farm country. And it's really nice because it is lightweight. It is a nitrogen fixer. It is wonderful for attracting beneficial insects, all kinds of bees, ladybugs. It does have edible flowers, so if you get hungry out in the garden, you want to try a snack. I would say it tastes a little bit like, you know, when straw smells good, like that sweet scent of like freshly cut dried straw. The crimson clover reminds me of that flavor a little bit, so I try to eat a few of them every spring. Again, this one is not recommended if you have root knot nematodes, but if you don't, this is definitely a go-to beautiful fall cover crop. This is showing right here, this is our, these are our raised beds in the kitchen garden, and you can see on the left where we have cut down the crimson clover with this was with a weed eater. And you can see it's kind of messy, but pretty fast with a weed eater, and you just cut it as close to the soil as possible. And then I just rake all of that, all those leaves and stems, just pile them on top of each other and sort of spread them out. And I'm a big fan of just leaving my cover crop on top of the soil and letting it slowly break down over time rather than tilling it in or integrating it into the soil. So for the most part, I like to do that. It's lower energy input on my part. You do lose a little bit of your nitrogen, you lose a little bit of carbon that way. But if you're doing like a no-till method, then this works well too. You still get the organic matter. It's just going to be you're going to get it more slowly, and it's a little bit less efficient, but you didn't have to till up your soil. So it's my preferred method. Mustard, this one is a good one, a good fall cover crop because it has lightweight stems, super easy to grow, does attract beneficial insects. You can see the little bee there, and maybe even some butterflies that will come and enjoy the pollen and nectar from your mustard next spring. And then the big exciting thing about mustard is that it is a biofumigant. So all mustards have a little bit of this property where they can help to eradicate some soil-based diseases, like some fungal diseases that are in the soil. And also they can help to eradicate or suppress root knot nematodes. And one in particular that is good with the root knot nematodes, and this is, you can hear me talk about this, you know, I've been talking about it a lot through this talk, but it's a common problem in the Southeast, and it's definitely a problem that I have in the kitchen garden, so I'm always looking for ways to naturally control or suppress the root knot nematodes. So Mighty Mustard is a variety that is patented or trademarked, but it has been bred to have the highest level of these mustard oils. So it can be really effective at fumigating your soil. You do have to turn the mustard leaves when they're fresh. You want to turn those under and integrate them into the soil. if you're using it to eradicate soil-borne diseases or root knot nematodes. So you want to think about that. You want to cut it down and then turn it under the soil. Or I have even just cut it down and then I've piled soil and fresh compost on top of it as a way to trap those mustard oils in the soil and not let them sort of evaporate and go off into the atmosphere. So you do want to find a way to trap those oils into the soil. But this is one that you'll see growing in the kitchen garden this year because I am using it as a biofumigant. Winter wheat is it's a nice one. It's beautiful, lush green color all winter long. It's a good one for increasing soil organic matter, as are all of the cover crops that I've mentioned. But winter wheat's especially good at that. It's got nice bulk. This one is really efficient at scavenging those excess nutrients in the soil and holding them there, you know, at the top of the soil where we want them to be for next year's crop. It's another fast grower that's good for suppressing weeds, winter weeds. You do want to cut this one down before the seed matures, and it should die pretty easily. And this one is, I just weed whacked it to the ground in spring. Tillage radish, this one is pretty interesting. This is also known as it's a type of daikon radish. It is good at increasing soil organic matter, and its big claim to fame is that it breaks up compacted soils. So these big fat radish roots drill down into the soil and can help break up compacted soil. So you can see the picture here on the top right. This picture came from Johnny's Selected Seeds, and this one is also a nutrient scavenger. You do want to make sure that the tillage radish gets planted deep enough so that it will you'll get the maximum drilling power out of it. So you can cover the seed with about 1 inch of soil and get it nice and covered well. It is only hardy to 20 degrees Fahrenheit. And so like I was talking about the winter kill thing, this is one that would winter kill possibly. So you can see in the bottom right here, these are radishes that have been killed by cold winter temperatures. And so the material on top will just sort of dry up and disappear, and the radish that's deep in the soil will break down, add organic matter, and the soil that's left behind is nice and loosened up by those radish roots. I haven't actually grown the tillage radish yet, but I'm excited to try it. And Phacelia is the last one we're going to look at. This one is also new to me. I'm going to be planting some out this fall. It does like cooler weather to grow, but it's not going to overwinter. So this one is a good one for increasing organic matter, scavenging nutrients, very attractive to pollinators and other beneficial insects. And it's just a really pretty blue color, and it's really common if you get some, you'll see a lot of cover crop mixes or blends, and Phacelia is often one of the ingredients in the cover crop blends. So I'll have to get back to you on more details about how effective it is, but I'm just really excited to grow it because it is so pretty, as well as being beneficial. So a couple of challenges to keep in mind, the possible, things that may happen. Cover crops can sort of tie up the bed sometimes. So like if you're waiting for them to bloom, you may be unable to plant in that bed until you have dealt with your cover crop. So especially if you have like a really small space, sometimes that can be frustrating. But if you plan it out right, it can be fine. Just be aware that, it may be early spring and you may be looking at that crimson clover like, when is that going to start blooming? Because I've decided I want to plant cabbages. Well, you might not be able to plant cabbages in your crimson clover bed. You may have to wait until mid-May once you've taken down the crimson clover and it's broken down, and then you maybe plant tomatoes in that bed. So it can tie up your bed, but with with some planning and just knowing to expect that, it's worth it, because you're going to have more success with your crop because you have taken care of your soil. Some crops, like we talked about, can harbor specific pests and diseases. So if you know that you have a specific pest or disease in your garden, I would sort of investigate the cover crop that you're thinking about growing and make sure that it's not going to help those pests or diseases sort of subsist in your garden over the winter. So it's worth it to do a little bit of research. And then there is that possibility of the plant becoming a weed, and so you just need to be committed to taking it down in the springtime before it's allowed to create seeds. A few good seed sources. Speaking of seeds, I like Johnny's Selected Seeds. They cater to a lot of farmers and small scale farmers, large scale farmers, and home gardeners. So it's a nice place to get bulk seed. High Mowing Organic Seeds, they have a good variety of cover crops. Knox Seed is local here in Knoxville, and they have a lot of your standard cover crops there. They'll have them if you want to just go somewhere in person. They'll have a lot of the common ones. And then Mayo Garden Center, they usually have cover crop seeds. They still are a good source for seeds. And then a few of these you can get in the bulk section of natural food stores. So buckwheat is one that I often get at natural food stores because people like to sprout it and eat those little sprouts. So you can actually find like organic bulk buckwheat seeds at food co-ops. And you may be able to find radish seeds as well, and sometimes mustard seeds. So those are a few resources that I recommend. As far as more information, so we talked a little bit about seeding dates, but this website here, this first one listed, is this is from the USDA, and it's got some good, it's a good reference for seeding dates. And then the second resource here is our UT Organic Crop Production Unit. This is a great resource. This webpage that I'm sending you to here has a whole list of resources about cover crops. It covers all kinds of information about it. So that's a really good resource. And then this third item here is actually a book, and it is free to download. You can download a PDF version for free from SAR.org. So Building Soils for Better Crops. There's lots of good information out there about cover crops, and once you start looking into it, I hope that you'll get as excited about it as I am, because they are a really great way to boost the health of your garden. Thank you very much. If you ever have questions, I'd be happy to do my best to help you. You can email me here at hjones3@utk.edu, and happy gardening.